Hello, so let's talk about Godox lighting. And just to begin with, if you're looking for kind of detailed, intimate details of each different individual setting and menu item, then you're best to go elsewhere, because that's not what I'm all about. My name is Roy Riley, I'm a professional photographer, and I'm just going to talk today about how all this stuff fits into my life as a professional photographer and how I use it, and giving my thoughts and opinions on the system so far, I guess. And so if you want the long story short, it's all very good, all very capable stuff, great battery life, great range, very adaptable, and pretty much every choice that you could wish for, right? If you want a little bit more detail, then we're going to dive right in, and I'll just give you a little bit of history to begin with. So, what a time it is to be a photographer. Look at this. All of this stuff can be controlled from here, from this one little controller on the top of your camera. 5 lights, 5 different buttons, A, B, C, D, E. You can control each light individually from here without going to the softbox, without going to the light stand. Holy moly, when I think back to when I began in the world of off-camera flash, so that began for me in the 1990s. I didn't really ever like the on-camera flash look, so I started using a Vivitar 283. Anyone remember these? With this cord which plugged into the top of the camera and enabled you to hold the flash gun out. It's very restrictive in terms of where you could put it, only really within arm's reach, and wasn't really that powerful. And I wasn't the first by any means to use off-camera flash. There are other photographers doing it, but it was quite unusual at that time, and I never quite could escape the fact that I wanted more kind of control, more studio lighting style, but in on a location setting. So I started using these things, which were big old Bowen's 500-watt studio lights. And these you're supposed to plug these things into the mains, but I had a couple of different setups that I used, where I had basically a car battery in a box with wires hanging out of it that I used to plug this into. Big heavy thing that I would have to drag onto location, and I would get about 25 pops out of this thing, I think, something like that, before it all went flat or blew up or whatever happened. Not the best, but it did enable me to get that kind of more studio style lighting onto assignment. These are great still today, actually. 500 watts. Around that time, the strobist movement emerged with a company called Yongnuo started knocking out cheaper speedlights. Because when I wasn't using my Boeing, I'd be using a speedlight then with things like pocket wizards bolted on the side with various different leads and adapters. And they were always very good. The pocket wizards in particular were brilliant. But again, you were restricted in terms of power, and the whole thing was a little bit Heath Robinson-ish, because you'd always have sort of various different leads that would come unstuck or whatever, because it was all a bit kind of Frankenstein. So the strobist movement emerged, and Yongnuo were the first company that started knocking out pretty much cheap speed lights with cheap triggers. So for a couple of £100 you could get a bag full of speed lights and kind of deploy them in certain ways to get this really stylistic lighting. That was all very cool. Things move on a little bit. I then bought into the Elinchrom system. So I had the Elinchrom Quadra system, which is a great system for using on location, but ultimately quite big, and with leads and stuff, it was a little bit more complicated. So I got very excited when I heard that Godox were making all of this stuff. So to begin with, it was all a bit discombobulated. They brought out a few different speed lights with different triggers and different lighting setups with leads and external battery packs and different mounting options, and it was all a bit kind of unconnected and a bit unreliable and would overheat and stuff like that. So I kind of let the system grow a little bit. I kind of didn't buy in straight away. And then the AD200 came out, which this one is a Pikapro light, which is just a rebranded version of the Godox AD200. I will leave an affiliate link to Essential Photo in the link down below, which is an English company which sells all of this stuff in the UK. If you're interested, I get a kickback if you buy something, so thank you very much. Please do subscribe, by the way. Smallest photography YouTube channel in the world, but it is growing. Be a pioneer, be here first. Leave me a comment, positive comments. Say nice things, and give me a like and whatever the hell you want. I really do appreciate all of your contact, by the way. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about this. So the AD200 came along, And I thought this could be the perfect solution, really, to look at that. It has a modelling light, which you can change the output. But all the modelling lights on these things are kind of cool, but, you know, they're not really bright enough. They're kind of okay if you're, you know, if you're stuck. And they do help give an idea of direction of light, that kind of thing. We're not talking about the modelling light at the moment. So the AD200 was, you know, I thought the perfect compromise in terms of size v power, because it's 200 watts. Now it's about twice the power-ish of your average kind of high-end Speedlight. And yeah, it's not that much bigger. Battery life was extraordinary. Smallish battery, which when you think that I was carrying a car battery in a crate round not that long ago, or kind of a car battery, sized battery, this is remarkable that you can shoot with this thing kind of for such a long period of time. The battery does really well. Everything about this was perfect, apart from the interface. I found the interface just terrible. I couldn't see it in bright sunshine, couldn't see it when it was up high, firing into a softbox, couldn't see it when it was down low, firing up into an umbrella. You know, everything about it was just difficult to see. And these are the original 200s, by the way. The Pro, the AD200pro is probably a bit better. Let me know if you've got that light and if it is significantly better if you've used both. It'd be really interesting to hear. You can have different bulbs. So there's a bare bulb and there's the round head. This head is a little bit more money to go on to this light, or there's a Speedlight option. So the light in itself is great, but the control panel was woeful on the back. And I got really frustrated with this, nearly almost turned my back on the whole system because of that. But kept with it because of the, you know, just the flexibility of being able to have 400 watts of lighting in two Speedlights that could kind of go in a backpack or in your, you know, just so small and light and convenient. Next, I bought a Speedlight, because I need another Speedlight, and this is the V860 I think there's a Mark III now, and I'm going to kind of just give you my opinions and you can make your own mind up on these things. I think this is in some ways the best thing and also kind of a frustrating thing, because it's not quite as good in my opinion when you put it on the camera as a Canon Speedlight. I'm a Canon user shooting Canon R5 and 5D Mark IV, and it's just not quite as good, not quite as accurate, and a little bit annoying that sometimes you get hot, or, you know, it kind of just doesn't quite do as good a job as a Canon Speedlight. And I've come unstuck with it a few times and I get frustrated with it. But it kind of does the job. You know, maybe it's me, maybe it's user error, I don't know. But I prefer the Canon, so I use Canon Speedlights on camera. This is clever because it can be a master controller. In here is a master controller which will control all of these other lights if you want it to, while it's on the camera, and it can either be firing or it can actually be off and it can still be the master controller. But so it can do all of that, but you have to jump through 17 hoops of button pressing that will confuse the living hell out of you, or it does out of me anyway. And so it does work, but it's confusing. Now, if you used it every day and you used it only every day, you would probably get quite quick at using it. And I'm sure there'll be some very clever people out there that can use this in a heartbeat and make it sing and dance and do everything that you want to. But for me, it's always too frustrating, but I do know that it can do it. Also, it can be an off-camera flash working with either this as a controller or another one of these as a controller if you so wish. That means it's incredibly adaptable. So it does all of that stuff, which is more than anything else on this table will do. And it's also cheap. This is sort of half the price of the AD100 and kind of, you know, a lot less than the 200. I can't remember exactly the pricing, but kind of a third of the price maybe of the AD200pro. Maybe half the price. So frustrating, but kind of amazing all at the same time. Hope that makes some sense. Along comes then the 100, which I got so excited about the 100 because it's small and I work on my own a lot. Sometimes I don't have an assistant, and that means that I need to kind of be able to move around on location. If I've got an assignment where I need to be very mobile, moving between locations very quickly, which happens to me a lot, but you know, and really bringing off-camera lighting is just a pain because you can't carry it all. But what this enables me to do is to, with a simple light modifier, enables me to get effects which I wouldn't be able to get otherwise, because I wouldn't have all this other stuff with me, just because it's so light and portable. And always, you don't need something that can overpower the sun on a bright day and can light huge groups. Sometimes you just need a little bit of directional lighting, you know, maybe inside or with an editorial portrait, for example, and this is great. It's annoying that it's round, because in an ideal world we'd all have lights and everything perfect, but sometimes that's not the case on real world shoots, and you have to just kind of prop lights into places, and this obviously will roll a little bit because it's round. Has very simple interface. The interface on the back of the AD100 is so much better than the 200. It's a bit brighter, easier to see. Even though it's smaller, it's just easier to see. And the interface is just a little bit more progressive and evolved. But it's never gonna wrestle with the sun on a bright day. It's gonna be lost in a big modifier. It's a small light. Understand the nature of these things. Then we move on to the big boy, the AD400. I've got a couple of each of these lights, and this is my current favorite because it's big and it's heavy, but it's got the punch that you need to overpower the sun. I think 400 watts is a bit of a sweet spot. 400 watts, 500 watts, 600 watts, that kind of level of power is what you need for your main light to be able to light something properly outside on a big, bright, sunny day, and also to light a big group if you need to, or a big space if you need to. The evolution in the display here on the AD400 is just great. It's just really progressive. You can see clearly what's going on if you've got the camera up, the light up high, firing into a softbox, or down low, firing into an umbrella, or wherever it is, you can see it clearly, and all of the controls make sense. It's really easy to control. Battery life on them all is good. You will get, you know, for an editorial shoot over a couple of hours, you won't have to worry about the battery life on any of these lights. Sort of 200-300 flashes, they'll be fine. If you're doing an all-day corporate shoot of multiple headshots, the camera firing left, right and centre all the time, then you're going to need to look at either having spare batteries or sort of tactical charging between shots, if you like. So I hope this has been of some assistance to you. They all do fast sync. So typically flash you would only use up to 200th or 250th of a second. All of these have fast flash sync, which means that you can shoot with the shutter speed much higher. So if you're outside or you want a very limited depth of field, it will work, but it does depower the overall oomph of the flash. So you'll lose about half the power, maybe even a bit more, depending on which settings you're using, which you need to take into consideration when thinking about that. So you're not going to get the full 400 watts output on high sync. It's going to be a bit less power than that. I don't ever know quite how that works out in terms of the science. I just know that that's how it is in real life. So who is all this stuff for? You know, if you're somebody who is just starting on your journey, then I would recommend probably getting hold of one of the Speedlights, because though it's not perfect as we've outlined before, it enables you to use the flash on camera to get you know, to start understanding that journey, and you will get reasonable pictures with it. You can start using bounce flash as well if you want to. And also, if you know, as you move into the world of off-camera flash, it will give you the beginnings of that journey to be able to see how it works out. Because it's only your main light, you'll probably be able to work out the menu really easily. If you combine it with one of these things, then you kind of have the best of all the worlds in many ways, and then you can build on that system as you go along. If you're somebody who is a professional who needs to light kind of multiple different scenes across multiple different assignments, then, you know, I would suggest that probably you look at the bigger lights, certainly as a main light. And then, you know, I think these two together, the 400 and the 100, kind of are quite a nice combination actually, if you know, for a 2-light setup, and then throw in a couple of the 200s kind of for if you needed more complexity. I guess we each have to find our own way, you know, and I suppose my dream lighting setup is probably having an assistant with a bag load of these things that can come with me, that can kind of light each scene according to my needs, but that doesn't always work out like that. So when I'm going on an assignment, I would probably grab the 100 and a 200 because they would fit easily into my camera bag, and I know that I can actually achieve quite some substantial lighting with just these two lights. But if it was going to be a little bit more complex and I needed a big main light for, let's say, a big group, then definitely the 400 would come with me, or a couple of the 400s would come with me. I hope this has been of use to you. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.